Hey guys, I'm back. Exciting times for Jessie's. I've been away for, is it John? I think I've done 2 weeks. The show's run 2 weeks without me, which is crazy.
But you've been
like
a spectator, Steph.
I've
We've
been.
seen you in the chat. We see you in the chat, and so you can't stay too far away. I think.
No, I can't. I've just had to make sure that everyone's like, if the show's running, I'm asking questions. No, and especially like shout out to you, Bryce, Rosa, Savannah, everyone. I tuned in, I watched, I asked questions. So I had a great time being on the other side and really enjoyed that. And if you're watching today, make sure you go back and check out those episodes without me yammering away on them. So we could go see those. A lot. I mean, I've done quite a lot in the last. I had a birthday. Maybe I won't turn that. You can gesture from my t-shirt how old I am. My dad got me this and he asked me to wear it on Twitch. So hello, Dad. But yeah, I've done that. I've been away a couple of times, done a couple of speaking engagements, found out big news. I'm speaking at AWS London Summit. So if you're going to be at London Summit, come check out my talk. Throughout the next couple of weeks, I will be sharing more information, what the code is, what the session title is. So please come say hi if you're a fan of the show and you want to come chat. Someone's just popped in the chat. 99 best year. Yes, it is.
Steph, I want to know. Did you ever do one of those things where like you find out what song was like the chart topper the month or the day you were born?
We did it. I don't know, Jessie, have you ever done this? Have you ever looked at this? But I definitely did.
I have no idea what this
stupid. If anyone's watching, wants to find out what was the song, April 1999, 1993. Sorry, 1999. Not that young. Jeez. But yeah, anyway, so that's enough catching up. So let's get into it. So welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Stephanie Gooch, and I'm a Senior Optimization Architect in the Optics team. John?
Yeah, I'm John Massey. I'm a Principal Architect with the Optics team, covering our strategic accounts.
Awesome. So today, we're going to be talking about strategic object storage, and we have Jessie Felix from the storage team, the S3 team, which is very exciting. We love having our experts in from the product teams. So Jessie, do you want to give us your 1-minute origin story before we dive into the subject?
Yeah, for sure. And, first of all, happy belated birthday, Steph.
Thank you.
And so I'm a product manager at S3. I've been now at Amazon. I was looking at this earlier, a little bit over 7 years.
Wow.
So I've been here for quite a time. And what I do primarily as a product manager is working with customers directly and understanding what their pain points are and what are the things that we can do, that we can build to, optimize not only their spend, but hopefully streamline their operations as well.
Nice, thank you. So if you're watching today, if you put anything in S3, you should be paying attention and learning all from Jessie and John. John is an expert in S3 too, about how to store things with the best cost optimization in mind. So we're going to dive into a couple of bits. The first thing we want to talk about is storage tiers. We've done a few episodes on S3, so we're not going to go, I don't think, unless you guys think we should, we're not going to go super detailed about all the different tiers, what they are, but maybe along the angle of like where to start. Jessie, how do you often talk to customers who are interested in optimizing their storage and where to start?
Yeah, this, I talk to probably, 3 to 4 customers on a weekly basis. And I will bet that 50% of the time, it's customers asking me like, where do I get started in terms of like wrapping my hands around understanding my access patterns, and then based on this, like what are the things that I can do to optimize my storage cost? And typically a question will be like, hey, like, should I just put everything in intelligent tiering and let the machine take over and get, automatic cost savings? Is that the right thing for me? Or should I do something a little bit more hands-on? Typically stuff, I think the first step that I talk to customers about is like really understanding what the access pattern is for their data that they're storing in S3. And very high level, typically there's 2 broad access patterns where customers have a known or changing access patterns. Typically like data lake storage, where you have a lot of users, applications accessing data at different times. And for those types of workloads, intelligent tiering is the choice that many customers choose to take in optimizing storage. And I think that's the right choice. And there's other customers that know, like very, very detailed, like when certain data sets become cold after they upload them to S3. And then for those customers, typically it makes sense to think about like using lifecycle policies in combination with our storage classes.
So those that have more of a like fully awareness should start off with the life cycle, but if you're not sure. And John, is that the similar kind of stuff when you drive to talk to customers? Is that the kind of conversations you have?
Yeah, and I think the point you just made there, Jesse, is a really important one, where it's finding out the access patterns maybe at like a little bit of like a high level. And I think what we may have seen with some customers before was they were getting really dialed into optimizing lifecycle policies. They're looking at like very specific details, and they're looking at kind of all the different dimensions of that. And now with intelligent tiering, maybe they could take a step back from that and look more broadly at like, general access patterns, to try to decide like, hey, is intelligent tiering the right place for me to start? Or do I need to go through and look at like the more specific details there? And I'm trying to remember, go ahead, Jesse.
No, I think you're hitting something that's very interesting. And actually it came up with some of the customers that you and I have worked with, John, like where you sometimes like when you have like a lot of these larger data lake customers, we're talking about hundreds of buckets, right? So like they're not really necessarily trying to understand bucket by bucket the individual access patterns. And they're more looking broadly, I think you call it general access patterns, to see if something like intelligent tiering will make sense for them broadly.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to remember if it was from your reInvent talk, or something else we saw kind of around that same time frame. But there was a comment someone made where they said, these two different kind of general access patterns are the ones where you can actually pinpoint when the object is going to go from being frequently accessed to infrequent, or if you kind of can't do that, and that's a little bit different, I think, of a way to look at it than maybe folks had looked at it in the past. And that's a good way to kind of frame, hey, if I can't pinpoint exactly, and this is more of something where like a data lake, I don't control those access patterns. There's a separate set of users that are doing something. I can look at it, from a slightly different lens.
Yeah, that's totally spot on. Like, and typically the use cases where customers can pinpoint it, like it's like a lot of like media use cases where like content becomes cold typically pretty quickly after it's uploaded. Like we watch a video like 100 times depending on what video it is, but it's not going to get rewatched 100 times every day for the next 2 or 3 months, even days, right? And a lot of times customers that have those types of workloads, they're able to decipher, well, it makes sense to move everything from the S3 standard storage class to something that, to the standard and frequent access storage class for infrequent access, and even down to Glacier instant retrieval for data that is rarely accessed as well.
Interesting. Go on, John. You go.
I was going to say there's when we're talking about like this scenario, like someone trying to model it out and find out, hey, what's the best storage class or the best like storage tier to look at, that something special about intelligent tiering is that you kind of get this like secondary benefit too of not only maybe getting some optimizations and like rate reductions, you're getting like all these efficiencies from being able to kind of automatically move the objects between the different tiers that we have with an intelligent tiering. You get a little bit more visibility into some of those things that maybe you didn't know. This is something we've talked about before, where someone could enable intelligent tiering and then all of a sudden they find out, hey, a huge chunk of my data is something that I'm not accessing really at all. And maybe they can kind of look at like a second optimization pattern that kind of comes after that. So just wanted to bring that up because I think it's interesting, beyond just looking at, hey, what's going to be the lowest cost to store the objects, maybe you get this extra sense of insight from using something like intelligent tiering as well, kind of these like secondary benefits.
Yeah, that's a super interesting point, John. Like the whole point around like customers having like these aha moments, like, and we saw it after we launched the archive instant access tier, where we automatically moved objects from infrequent access to archive instant access based on objects that haven't been accessed for more than 90 days. There was a lot of customers that were like, we didn't expect that much data that has not been accessed for like over 90 consecutive days. Like, that's really fascinating. And I'm curious on like, how do you see customers, you said that they're thinking about like new optimization patterns. Like what are customers doing with that information that you see?
Yeah, I think then they can go through and they can kind of survey all of their buckets and find out, hey, are there either specific buckets themselves or specific sections of the environment, like, the organization, where maybe they're seeing higher distributions in that archive instant access tier. What's surprising them, and then maybe what's meeting, expectations that they already had. That's probably the interesting part, just, hey, now you have this whole new sense of visibility into access patterns, and you could do it at like an org-wide scale using a tool like, S3 Lens, and do it for free with these free reports that are available. So just totally new level of visibility that folks didn't have before, and they can kind of take advantage of just natively as part of adopting the storage class.
That's a great segue. I was going to jump in and mention S3 Lens, and before I do, also, if anyone's watching has any questions, comments, feel free to put them in the chat, or email us costoptimization@amazon.com if you're watching on YouTube, and if you are, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. But any questions, we're here to help. And on the S3 Lens, just to jump in on this, recently, when we're talking about this kind of stuff, I'm dealing with a lot more personas in my customers, right? So I'm talking to I've always done this, but I think I'm really becoming more acutely aware of who my audience is. And that's something you have to be really careful of. And so when we have Twitch, like everyone watching, you're probably all from different places. Let us know if you're what your role is. That'd be interesting to know from all the different backgrounds. But when you're talking to, say, a developer or an engineer, how do you approach that conversation? I see there's a comment in the chat. We'll come to that definitely in a second. But how do you start with a conversation with engineers when it comes to storage?
So typically, in talking to engineering leaders and the adoption of different storage classes stuff, the types of questions that I get are more around how does this change the way that I access data? Are there any performance implications, right? So S3 standard, and all of our storage classes, by the way, they're built for 11 nines of durability. And standard infrequent access, glacier instant retrieval, and intelligent tiering without the asynchronous access tiers activated, they're all built for millisecond performance. But customers want to get reassurance that, hey, if I move data to intelligent tiering, and as you're moving data between the access tiers, it's not going to affect, my application because of, the degraded performance, for example. So that's a very typical question that I get. And within that, actually, it's good that you asked this. Like, oftentimes I've had customers that'll say, oh, I thought that you automatically move data to archive access and deep archive access, which are designed for asynchronous access. And the answer is no, we don't automatically do that. That's an optional configuration, which, it'll allow you to get even lower storage cost savings for rarely accessed data, but we don't do that automatically. That's something that's completely optional.
That's very interesting. The whole, first of all, people asking about the how to access it, and that's probably highlighting the fact that I'm speaking to people in FinOps more than I'm speaking to engineers, because they don't ask that question. So that's something good to pass along the chain, and also this just this general idea of like how to look at the data and how to see it is great. All right, I'm going to jump on to the two questions in the chat. One's a kind of point. So see if you agree with this, Jessie. If the data is moving through AIA for 90-day creation, it's worth asking the question is whether you need to store that data, e.g. what it's used for. Is that a good kind of statement to have?
Yeah, well, two things there. So the way that intelligent tiering works, I realize that maybe we didn't actually go into that, but the way that intelligent tiering works is that once you upload or transition data to intelligent tiering, we monitor access of every individual object, and we'll move data between frequent, infrequent access, and archive instant access based on the time it was last accessed. So 30 days of no access, it'll go from frequent to infrequent. and 90 days of consecutive no access from the infrequent access tier to the archive instant access tier. So it's not based on the time of creation. This is very powerful because it's more indicative of future access, typically is what we see. And just want to make sure I clarify that. Now, the question around whether you need to store the data if it hasn't been accessed for 90 consecutive days, the answer is that's a very individual question to the business, right? Like, I'll give you a very relevant example, and I'll do a plug at the same time. Actually, we just published a case study with Illumina that is talking about the big success of using intelligent tiering for effectively an analytics platform that is made available to their users. And one of the key requirements for that application is that data is always immediately accessible, and the user controls when the data is deleted. Illumina doesn't control that. And often their users do not delete that data for genomics analytics. So that's one example where, should they delete it? I don't know. It's very user dependent.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for the questions, guys. We've got one more we'll dive into. When you talk about access patterns, what are you referring to? The way objects are stored within the bucket via naming? Or would it be great to discuss common access patterns? So maybe define, we have thrown that around a little bit, maybe just one sentence, what access patterns are and what common ones would be. I guess common is a bit of a vague term, but for us, but go for it.
Yeah, so let's talk about access patterns and the way that they're relevant for optimizing your storage. So one of the things to call out, we've talked a lot about intelligent tierings, but let me quickly talk about the individual storage classes. So standard and frequent access and Glacier instant retrieval, as they both have a lower cost to store data than S3 standard. At the same time, the cost of accessing that data does increase. And very specifically, there's two dimensions that are very relevant. So number one is the number of requests, So the per cost of a request is higher, and also there is a per gigabyte retrieval charge associated with these storage classes. So in terms of what this means in access patterns is, if you store a gigabyte in standard and frequent access, where you get 40% lower cost in standard, you're paying 0.0125 per gigabyte. There's a retrieval charge of 1 cent per gigabyte retrieved. So imagine you store a gigabyte and you retrieve a full gigabyte, so 100% retrieval rate effectively. You're already at a point where your total cost is very similar to standard for these individual storage classes. So this metric that I'm talking about, by the way, this retrieval rate, this is data that's also available within Storage Lens to kind of give you an idea if it makes sense to use something like standard and frequent access or Glacier instant retrieval, where that per gigabyte retrieval charge is slightly higher than S3 standard and frequent access. So I'll pause there.
John, anything you want to add?
I was gonna say maybe we just kind of do a quick recap for the folks that are listening.
Yes, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So yeah, we're kind of going through a lot of really important details. And Jessie, keep me honest as I kind of play back what you said. So we've got a bunch of different storage classes, and with intelligent tiering, we're paying similar to what our S3 standard cost is, plus that monthly monitoring and automation charge per object, which typically ends up being pretty nominal. It's something you can calculate based on the total object count and the pricing page that Seth just listed. But that compares to other storage class options where typically what we see is the cost per gigabyte to store it goes down as we kind of expect the retrieval to become less and less frequent. But in those cases, we're paying moderately more for the retrieval cost with those storage classes as kind of a trade-off. And okay, anything else you wanted to add there?
Yeah, and I think where you're going with this is with intelligent tiering, your costs do not scale that way. There's no retrieval charges with intelligent tiering.
Mhm.
You pay that for object monitoring and automation. We automatically move it between access tiers. And when you access data, there's absolutely no retrieval charges. We simply move back the objects that are accessed back to the frequent access tier.
Got it. So a couple key differences for the folks that are listening out there would be, one, you're not paying those retrieval costs. The transitions are happening automatically based on the access patterns as opposed to the creation date, which might be how folks are doing it with lifecycle policies. And then everything is kind of tiering through those three different storage tiers where in the frequent access where the objects initially live, they're going to get kind of S3 standard like pricing, similar. And then after 30 days of no access, it kind of moves to a tier that's similar in price to the infrequent access. If they're not accessed for 90 days, it's going to move them down to one that gets kind of glacier-like pricing. And that's, no retrieval cost for bringing the objects back. They'll kind of run back through that cycle, as they're accessed from any of those three tiers. And that's all going to be synchronous with, millisecond-like latency, right?
Correct. That's right.
Thanks for summarizing, guys. I think we've covered a lot in lots of different mediums. So it's great. It's great. There's so many questions coming in. And also shout this, my data retention policy, if it doesn't spark joy, throw it out. Love that. Don't change. So going off of what you guys are talking about, me and John spoke about this before, which was like, we've kind of touched on this, but when to use intelligent tiering versus when to use a lifecycle policy is like obviously quite a tricky thing. Are there any, like, if we're really basicing it out, is it just that intelligent tiering? I don't know what the policy is. Lifecycle, I do. Let me start again. Let's cut that and put it ready for a short. When you compare intelligent tiering versus lifecycle policies, is it as simple as when you know the access pattern, lifecycle, when you don't know the access pattern, intelligent? Is that it? Is that kind of full stop? That's it?
I think that's a very nice summary, Steph. And I actually agree with that. The only exceptions that I've seen are more customer based, where I have seen customers, with a lot of buckets, just because it's a large enterprise, and they explicitly make the decision, I'm not going to invest resources in figuring out how to optimize, like hundreds of buckets. So I'm just gonna hire intelligent tiering to do the work for me, just because they rather, yeah.
That's a kind of good way of looking at it, and I guess the same as you would think about like even a third party tool to do stuff for you is exactly the same. You're just paying Amazon to do that. That's a great way. And I think, and then you have those edge cases, I guess, where if you're so confident that this file I think of things, I always use the reference of like audit logs, I guess is a good one, where it's like, that file is getting put in every single day, but you don't need it to access it every single day. So you just straight away in. But yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. So I think we've covered a bunch about intelligent tiering. We've got about 5 minutes left. I know that you wanted to talk about some Pi announcements, Jessie. That was one thing we wanted to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a bunch of interesting things that are coming out, and actually one of the things that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about are the asynchronous storage classes like Glacier Flexible Retrieval, Glacier Deep Archive, which are very popular storage classes as customers want to get like the lowest storage cost in the cloud, $1 per terabyte with Glacier Deep Archive. And one of the very relevant announcements with our Glacier storage classes is that we did announce like throughput enhancements for both of these storage classes at no cost for customers. So that's definitely something that you want to go and check out. The other thing, just here very quickly, is that we have a lot of customers that use file connectors such as like Goofies, because they have some file semantics. And we also very recently announced an alpha release of Mount Point, which effectively gives you a file connector on S3. And within that, you're also there's some throughput improvements that you're able to get from accessing that directly on S3. So that's something totally worthwhile checking out. And that's particularly popular with customers, with like machine learning workloads, particularly. But it's super exciting space that we're getting into, and it's yeah. I think I'll pause there.
So for those customers, Jesse, you're saying that they can use the file connector to basically just mount their S3 buckets directly over to some client that they have out there. Is that correct?
That's spot on. That's right.
Cool. Way cool. So it opens up some new use cases for folks, makes it easier for them to interact with S3 and kind of use this as like, hey, big repository for all that stuff that's kind of out there.
Yeah, that's right. Like and it's there's a lot of appetite for customers. Like it's not full POSIX compliance. It's you get file semantics, but typically a lot of these workloads don't need full POSIX. So it is very interesting because the feedback is we just want to use S3, but we do require some of these semantics.
So we've kind of like talked about a bunch of different like feature things that have come out related to S3 in like the past couple of months, or even I guess a little bit beyond that, like things like archive instant access, retrieval improvements for Glacier, things like we didn't mention the new tiered pricing for S3 Lens, the connector for all this. And I think what I'm trying to get to is like one of the reasons why I think folks are so excited about using S3 is when they take advantage of these things, these new features are kind of coming out and sort of paying dividends, and they're getting all these new capabilities and enhancements just while their data is still sitting in there, which is just so cool.
Yes, but keep the feedback coming naturally, right? we want to continue to deliver things that make your life easier and help you speed up your business. Like really, like a lot of these things, like we just want to like simplify your architecture and make sure that your business is more agile.
Definitely, yeah. Feel free, like always, email guys. We're ready to hear from you. Okay, that is it for today. Thank you, Jesse. This has been great. We've talked about a bunch of different things. So again, if you are interested in this topic, email us costoptimization@amazon.com, which I've taken off the screen down below. We can pass you on to Jesse, or you can always tweet us at AWS Steph for me. And yeah, let us know. Are you using S3 Intelligent Tiering? How are you finding it? Have you made any good savings? We can highlight you in one of our episodes. And next week is our final episode of this season. So make sure to come back next week. We are talking all about lessons learned from a finance practitioner. So Eric from Boomi, sorry, it's not his last name, is coming on, and really excited to have a customer come on and tell their stories. So come along and bring any questions that you have. Apart from that, have a good week, everyone, and we'll see you next time.